Hi, I'm Joe Indigo, and this is Fast Class. Today we're going to be talking about corn. Oh, I'm sorry. Stan has just informed me this episode's going to be about St. Francis. I really want to talk about corn.
Mr. Fuchsia, did you know that St. Francis was the patron saint of animals and ecology?
Yes, I do, me from the past, but while it's fun to utilitarianly address saints as wish granters based on their arbitrary patronages, today we're going to be talking about the life of St. Francis and how his example is relevant for us today. And shave that mustache. St. Francis was born Giovanni de Pietro de Bernardone in 1181 to a devout Catholic mother and a famous not-so-devout father.
Look at the camera.
In fact, when he found out his wife had his son baptized Giovanni after the Saint John the Baptist, he was furious and renamed their son Francesco after his successful business dealings in France. Because what better way to get back at your wife for naming your son after a great saint than to name him after the last place he visited? Good thing he wasn't doing business in Turkey. Growing up, St. Francis always had a crowd around him, spending nights at wild parties. Everyone loved Francis and he had everything that he wanted. However, it wasn't enough. Why wasn't it enough? Why wasn't it enough? He sought honor as a knight, but the only way to become a noble was to win victory in battle. So the first chance he got, he ran off to fight against the nearby town of Perugia. Apparently people from Assisi were good partiers, but not as good soldiers, as most were butchered in the battle. In 1201, Francis was finally among the nobility he so longed for. Chained in a dungeon as a prisoner of war. When he was finally ransomed, he returned to Assisi and picked up searching for glory where he left off. That glory came calling in the form of the Fourth Crusade. As you might know from reading my best-selling novel, The Mistake in Our Tiny Sons, Francis hadn't been gone a day when he had life-changing dreams. In the dream, God told him that war wasn't the answer and that he should return home. So he did. He took the phrase, "Follow your dreams!" very literally. It wasn't all bad though, because he used this opportunity to pray in a cave, weep for his sins, and find overwhelming joy in the presence of God. My book, The Issue with Far-Off Celestial Bodies, deals with another important event in the life of St. Francis. Let's take a look in the Bible.
Francis found himself riding through the countryside. Then he happened upon a leper. First, Francis was disgusted at the sight, then he was disgusted at himself. This was a real what would Jesus do moment as Francis got off his horse and embraced and kissed the leper. He felt a great peace come over him as he rode off. Looking behind him, he noticed the leper had vanished, and he realized it had been a test from God, one that he had passed.
His spiritual journey led him to the rundown church of San Damiano. He was praying there one day when he heard God's voice speaking to him.
Francis, repair my church!
Being eager to fulfill these heavenly wishes, Francis set out to rebuild God's church, the little one, San Damiano. Francis, excited, eager, and a bit denser than your average saint, immediately set out to gather materials to build God's church. Since we all know he was so good at thinking things through and had great hair, it should come as no surprise that he decided to steal fabric from his father's shop for mine. Let's take a look at this scene from my novel, The Conundrum with Stellar Objects, in the thought bubble yet again.
Enraged at his stealing, Francis's father brought him before the bishop in front of the whole town. He demanded that his son return the money and renounce his right as heir. The bishop, feeling compassion for Francis, explained that he didn't need the money and that God would provide Francis with all he needed for his mission.
Francis gave back all the money and all his father had given him, including the clothes on his back, saying,
Pietro Bernardone is no longer my father. From now on, I can say with complete freedom, Our Father who art in heaven.
Francis had nothing and everything all at once. In his newfound freedom, he set off with greater fervor to follow God's call. He begged for stones to rebuild the little chapel of San Damiano with his own bare hand. Francis still hadn't realized that it was the capital C church God was asking him to rebuild, not the walls of San Damiano. Soon Francis would start preaching, and the true message would become clear. His preaching was focused on returning to God and obedience to the church. Hearts were being transformed, and companions came to Francis,
Wanted to share the joy and freedom he had found.
Francis looked to the Bible for a rule to guide his small following.
To sell all you have and give to the poor, to take nothing on your missionary journey, and to take up your cross daily. Francis was so serious about following his rule of of living in poverty, charity, and obedience, that when a thief stole his hood, he sent one of his brothers after him to give him his robe as well. Francis' charity was overwhelming. It is said that he preached an entire sermon on thankfulness to a flock of birds, and they only left after he had dismissed them. Wow. Francis and his followers attracted quite a bit of negative attention. People feared what they thought was craziness until they noticed the overwhelming joy these beggars had. Soon the people that feared him sought to join him. You know, Francis is such an inspiration in my life. Like, I just adore him so much.
Hey! What are you doing here?
Okay,
This isn't even your time frame.
Okay.
Francis soon realized that he needed to seek approval from the Pope for a new order, so he set out for an audience with Pope Innocent III.
You can imagine how the Pope would receive such a sight. He had St. Francis thrown out, but later that night, Pope Innocent had a nightmare about the Lateran Basilica falling to pieces, and a tiny man in rags holding it up. Quickly, he summoned Francis and granted him permission to preach.
Oh, it's time for our open letter. Dear Nightmares, thank you for continually inspiring us to do the right thing. If it wasn't for you, Joseph never would have gotten out of that prison in Egypt. You helped Ezekiel put words to God's message to the Israelites. You ensure I always wear pants when I go to school, and you've trained me for the inevitable event when I come face to face with a zombie. What would I ever do without you? Upon his return home, Francis had found out that his order had grown into the thousands and had relaxed his rule along the way. Disheartened but not defeated, he decided to renounce his rule over the order and become just another brother among them. He wasn't too upset about it, so that's good. Towards the end of his life, during an intense time of prayer, Francis received the stigmata, the wounds of Christ, on his hands and feet. The years of poverty and wandering had made Francis ill, and his sight was fading. Corrective eye surgery during this time involved cauterizing the face with a hot iron. Francis spoke these words to the fire before the procedure.
Brother Fire, the Most High has made you strong and beautiful and useful. Be courteous to me now in this hour, for I have always loved you, and temper your heat so that I can endure it.
Afterwards, Francis said he didn't feel a thing. That's all well and good, but I'm gonna stick with my glasses. Francis died on October 3rd, 1226, and was canonized as a saint just 2 years later. His life is a reminder to rebuild God's church in our own concrete, simple, and good ways. Francis revealed the selfishness and idolatry of his own generation and turned a light towards the peace, poor, and common good. Where have we strayed as a culture? What lights can you shine to guide us back to the path that God laid out for us? Next time we're going to do that corn episode I mentioned. And I'm Joe Chartreuse. Thanks for watching. See you next week.